Philippines is still in the watch list of the international labor organizations in terms of, especially in terms of child trafficking, and there are still high incidence of cases of child labor. We have around 3.21 million children in child labor, and out of that number, 2.99 million are involved in hazardous labor. That's as of 2030, just about last year.
What is child labor for you?
Child labor is work that harms the child's total development. It's also against the laws of the country, the labor laws of the country.
Pinasyalan ko naman si Emong. Uhaw na uhaw siya. Pagod sa pangangariton. Mula umaga hanggang gabi, pangangalakal na ang trabaho niya. Maliit siya ngunit malakas ang katawan. Palakaibigan si Emong, masiyahin, mahilig magpatawa.
So, child labor involves, first of all, the children must be below 15 years old here in our country. And then, the amount of work is considered as hazardous. It means it could affect their health, it could affect their psychological well-being, their education. So, with those components, if those are satisfied, it could be considered as child labor.
Ang layo naman ang tingin ni Boknoy. Tila takot na takot. Di na naman yata siya nakapag-uwi ng 2 latang sardinas na toka niya. Tiyak na tubo na naman ang tatama sa kanyang katawan. Minsan nga binuhusan ang ulo niya ng mainit na tubig. 7 taon pa lamang si Boknoy, mukhang 40 anyos na. Palibasa, walang sustansya ang kanyang kinakain. Kanin at asin lamang. Minsan may tagpipisong sitsirya. Puro bulati na marahil ang nasa tiyan niya.
What are the forms of child labor?
Actually, in the Philippines, there are worst forms of child labors, and this includes first, child labor in the agricultural and domestic services, wherein children are involved in the sugarcane plantations, coconut, corn, rice, rubber, tobacco, bananas, and hog production. This is considered as a worst form of child labor because children are exposed to extreme weather conditions. They are engaged in dangerous machineries and tools, as well as heavy workloads, and apply harmful pesticides, especially in the farms here. And then another worst form of child labor includes domestic servants, or sa ating bansa kasambahay. It's considered as worst form because children are working for long hours without rest or very little rest, and then they are isolated from their families, from their homes. And of course, since they are living outside their families, they are susceptible to sexual harassment, verbal and physical abuse, as well as, in some cases or most cases, these children are denied access to education. And then another worst form of child labor is mining and quarrying. In this setting, the children are involved in carrying heavy loads of rocks, and as well as yung compressor mining, where they use compressor for their oxygen, and then they go under that pit, dark pit with water. Another worst form of child labor is deep sea fishing, or in our country it's called muroami. So it's dangerous because children go to the depths of the sea to disturb the fish, to go to the nets, and then another implication is that because of the high pressure of water under the sea, their eardrums might explode, so it's really dangerous for their health. And another worst form of child labor is pyrotechnics. This is present usually in Bulacan, because it's the pyrotechnic capital of the Philippines. And children as young as 3, 5, 7 are engaged already in the production of the firecrackers. As you know, firecrackers are dangerous and they might explode if ever not handled properly. And there have been reports that children actually died while making the pyrotechnics. And then another is the commercial sexual exploitation, which involves pornography and sex tourism. So it's dangerous to the child's well-being because in pornography, it affects their social and emotional development, their self-esteem is decreased, and in sex tourism, aside from the psychological impacts to the child, it also affects the health because of the socially transmitted diseases which the child could get while doing the job. And then another is children recruited as soldiers, or in some instances they are used as drug couriers by syndicates. So there were reports that the MILF, Bangsamoro Islamic Federation Movement, and Abu Sayyaf recruits children as soldiers in their battlefield. And then another is the children involved in the scavengers in the dump site. So as we know, the dump site contains lots of toxic materials, of waste, and it's really detrimental to their overall health. And then, of course, we have the working children who sell sampaguita, but the effect as to its hazard is not yet studied. But they are prone to car accidents and along the streets. So far, those are the worst forms of child labor here in the Philippines.
What is the cause of child labor, or why is there child labor?
Primarily, it's attributed to poverty. So, poverty has a lot of underlying problems along with it. So, what's sad is that they forget their education and eventually become school dropouts. And then they would not be able to provide also the needs of their families in the future. So it tends to be a cycle that can be broken if appropriate interventions are provided for these children.
What are the articles and bills related to child labor?
RA 9231, or an act providing for the elimination of worst forms of child labor and affording stronger protection for working children. So it defines what are the worst forms of child labors and how this could be removed, how these children could be removed from the worst forms of child labor, as well as the penalties for those who violates this law.
Si Onse. Siya ay isang anak ng dancer. Minsan, binubugaw pa ng sarili niyang ama ang kanyang ina. Nahihiyaman siya, wala siyang magawa. Binabatok-batukan siya ng mga kalaro niya. Inaasar, binibiro, makirot na biro. Namumulot siya ng scrap at ibinebenta ng mura. Wala siyang tiyak na kakainin. Di pa yata siya nakatikim ng tunay na hamburger sa buong buhay niya. Ang lagi lang niyang kinakain, yung mga hamburger na galing sa basura. Pero ang laman ng nanay niya, pinagsawaan at pinagpiestahan na ng ibang tao.
In our country, we have agencies like the Department of Labor and Employment, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, of which I belong, and then the Department of Education, and then other agencies which support the reduction of child labor in our country. We also have non-government organizations supporting this cause. So primarily, as the Department of Labor is in charge of providing, of mitigating the employment of children in terms of those hazardous employment. And then our department, we have the conditional cash transfer, or the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program, that provides assistance to children school-age children, so that instead of working to earn for their additional needs, the government provides subsidies in terms of cash to these families so that they would these children would have no reason to work, and then they would just study because it's a conditionality. They would be given cash as long as they are studying regularly. So that promotes the education of the child and reduces the child labor occurrence. Another law supportive to that is the Enhanced Basic Education Act, or the K plus 12 as we all know it. So with this law, instead of working in the farms or in the dangerous workplaces, children are encouraged to complete basic education. So in our country, the required basic education is at least high school. So that supports the reduction of child labor. So those are just some of the laws, but there are other laws supporting child labor.
What improvements can be done concerning what the government can do against child labor?
Actually, in terms of improvement, we have many laws here in the Philippines, but what's lacking is the full implementation of those laws. So that's one thing. Implement the laws. Be consistent with regards to the implementation of laws, because sometimes it's implemented, sometimes it's ignored. So be consistent with the implementation of the laws.
What can you suggest that we Benilians, or the whole Lasallian community, can do about it?
So we have our Center for Social Action, and it has partner organizations, communities, and in that community, there are some cases of child labor. So what the Lasallian student, the Benilian students can do is to help in the advocacy by promoting what is child labor, by allowing people to understand what is child labor, its effects, and then through also the community activities, through the immersion, they could include the advocacy on child labor through the community activities and immersion. So I think in that simple way, and also by increasing the campaign through mass media, by promoting, by preparing advocacies which are creative, innovative enough for children and parents to understand. So those are some of the little ways which can contribute to increasing the awareness of child labor and eventually helping mitigate the increase of child labor incidents. Child labor is something that can be prevented. We could also help those children who have been victims of child labor, and support is needed for these children, as well as our country needs to be more aware, our citizens needs to be more aware of child labor. So if we are aware on child labor, we can do something about it. And as students, the students can also play a vital role in promoting the advocacy on child labor by also orienting the other students to be involved on activities, advocacies, protecting children, especially preventing them from child labor.